In alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulullah. We're continuing with the hadiths from Sahih Muslim, Kitab el Nikah, which is the book of marriage. So many things we're finding out about a valid marriage, contract, etc. So, having discussed the hadiths that relate to what constitutes a valid marriage, we're now going to move on to what happens after the marriage. We're married now. We're going to speak about intimacy. Are there certain conditions or rules in regards to intimacy? We're going to also answer the question today about birth control and fosterage. And let's go ahead and get started with the first chapter here. The first chapter here addresses how it is not permissible to marry a woman who has been divorced by three pronouncements until she has remarried another man, had relations with him, and completed a divorce from him. And let me explain what that is and why they put that in this section. We're going to talk about divorce later. But in Islam, a man is only allowed to divorce and take a woman back twice. The After the second time, if he divorces her, he cannot take her back. In fact, he can not even remarry her. They cannot be remarried unless she marries another man and completes relations with him and all of that. The reason being is, again, this shows the hikmah or the wisdom of Allah. Women, we are Allah's most emotional creatures. We women, we fall in love with the idea of love, which is why we have to have guardians when it comes to even getting married. Well, Allah knows his creation better than we know ourselves. A woman can be with a man and think that he's God's gift on earth until she meets another one. Once a woman has tasted the sweetness of another man, what happens? She'll forget about you. She'll realize that you were not God's gift after all. Because again, we women are so emotional and we're easily duped because of that. So this is why Allah says you cannot go back to that man unless you remarry another man and have intercourse, because 9 times out of 10, once you have intercourse with that other man, you're going to realize that your ex was not all that. He was not all that in a bag of chips. He was far from it. There's always something better out there for you. Okay? So this is why Allah makes this rule. We have the hadith, whereas the wife of one of the companions came to the Prophet and said, "O Prophet of Allah, I was married, but he divorced me. And this was the third time he divorced me. So I married Abdul Rahman ibn al-Zubair. But Ibn al-Zubair is impotent. In other words, he's not able to perform sexually." The Prophet smiled because he knew that she wanted to go back to her ex. That was all it was about. She was looking for a reason, to not be with the man she married so she can go back to her ex. The Prophet smiled and he said to her, "All you want is to go back to your ex, but guess what?" He told her, "You better go home and have relations with that man that you married." He said, "Because you cannot be with your ex until you have tasted the sweetness of your new husband." Because they knew that the man that divorced her, that the new man that she married was not impotent. She just wasn't going to give him a chance. And that's why Abu Bakr and them said, "Did you hear what she said? She had the nerve to say that Abdul Rahman is impotent. That brother ain't impotent. Okay? But the prophet knew that the only reason why she had come to the prophet with this was because she didn't want to go through with the relations with this her new husband, because she was still wanting her ex. So the prophet told her, until you taste the sweetness of your new husband, you can never go back to your ex. Because again, once she tastes the sweetness of the new man, she's not going to want her ex anyway. Because she'll realize that her ex wasn't all that. We women have a hard time moving on, oftentimes. We can fall in love with a man who's not good for us, a man who is toxic. We have to learn to move on. So that's the rule that Allah put into effect. If you and your husband have been divorced irrevocably, irrevocably means that you were married and he divorced you twice. The third time he divorced you, that's it. You cannot go back to him unless you remarry another man and have relations with that man and complete divorce with that man. Because 9 times out of 10, once you remarry, you ain't going to want to go back to your ex anyway. So that's something else that we need to keep in mind. So now, having moved on, we're married. What does Islam say about intimacy? Well, again, everything. Islam is not just a religion, but it's a way of life. And our way of life encourages us to remember Allah all the time, as often as we can, even during intimacy. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, anytime a man becomes intimate with his wife, he should say, in the name of Allah, O Allah, protect us against shaitan and keep shaitan away from whatever you have bestowed upon us. And if you have a male child, shaitan will not be able to harm him. So even when you're being intimate with your wife, you should remember Allah and make supplication. Okay, so again, try to make this supplication before you have intimate relations with your wives. And also, a lot of Muslims ask the question, dear Sister Layla, I just got married. What is forbidden for me? What is it that me and my husband cannot do intimately? Well, I'm going to answer this question. You can do whatever you want with your husband intimately, except have relations through your anus. Everything else is lawful. I don't care what anybody tells you. Everything else is lawful except relations through your anus. Allah says in the Quran, in the interpretation of the meaning, your wives are a tilth to you, enter them however you desire. The only rule is you cannot have relations with your wife when she's on her menses, nor can you have relations with her through her anus. Those are the only restrictions against us, sexually, when it comes to having relations with our spouse. Back in the Prophet's days, the Jews used to say that a man cannot have intercourse with his wife when she's when she's lying on her back, because if he does, a child will come out cross-eyed. And that's when the Prophet said, this is a lie. You can enter your wives however you want and doing any position you want, except do not enter them through their anus and don't have relations with them on their menses. That's it. So once you and your husband are married, you can have sexual relations however you like, in whatever position you like, doing whatever you like, as long as it doesn't involve anal intercourse or intercourse with you on your menses. Everybody understand? Also, once a woman and a man get married, Men have rights over women and women have rights over men. That's why you have to be so careful what you put in your marriage contract. The marriage contract, that's your chance to put down what you want to be honored for you. Okay? Because there are certain rights that Allah gave men over women and certain rights Allah gave women over men. Just like having more than one wife is a man's right, which is why you can't put that in a contract, or you shouldn't put it in there. You can put it in there, but he doesn't have to honor it because that's a right that Allah gave to him. Okay? And we'll talk about that later. Okay, but there are other rights too. Okay, for example, it is not permissible for a woman to get angry and not sleep in the bed with her husband. So that's another thing that you wouldn't put in a contract. You would not put in your marriage contract that me and my husband will sleep in separate rooms. No, because that's not a right that your husband has over you. Your husband has a right for you to share his bed. The Prophet ﷺ said, when a woman spends the night away from the bed of her husband, the angels will curse her until the morning. He also said, by he in whose hand is my soul, when a man calls his wife to his bed and she does not respond, Allah becomes displeased with her. And he will stay displeased with her until her husband is no longer angry with her. So again, this is another example as to why you don't put things like that in a contract. Because there are certain things that are your right. Your husband has a right to have more than one wife. Your husband has a right for you to sleep in his bed and share his bed. So you should not put those things in your contract because he doesn't have to honor any of that. Just like he can't put in his contract that he wants you to cover your face. Because covering your face is not part of your order. It is your right as a Muslim woman to not cover your face. Okay, so, be careful of stuff like that. So once you get married, you have to share your husband's bed. I know a lot of newlyweds. Sometimes I'll get a phone call from a sister saying, dear Sister Layla, I just got married. Me and my husband are angry. We're not speaking to each other, so I'm going to sleep in the guest room. I'm not going to sleep with him, for a while because I'm angry at him. No, you have to share his bed. I remember another sister had called me one time. She said, Sister Layla, I don't want to sleep with my husband anymore because he has a body odor. I told her, no, that's his right. You have to sleep with him. But if he has a body odor, why don't you tell him about it and help encourage him to take a bath? Take a bath with him. Shower with him and wash his body yourself together. But you cannot refuse his bed. If he calls you to his bed, you cannot refuse him. If his body odor is bad, then you need to tell him about it. Perhaps take a bath with him. Shower him yourself. That can be a very intimate reaction with each other. Okay? Also, the Prophet ﷺ said, whenever a man invites his wife to his bed and she does not come, and the husband spends the night being angry with her, the angels curse her, and also the El-Hurin. What you women don't understand is every believing man on this earth has a wife amongst the women of paradise, the El-Hurin. And they're waiting on them. So every time you make your husband angry, not only does Allah curse you, not only do the angels curse you, but the El-Hurin will curse you too. And they will say, may Allah kill you for making him angry. Soon he shall be with us. So again, this is a right that a man has And that's for his wife to share his bed and to respond to him when he calls upon her. The only time that you cannot give in to him when he calls for intimacy is say you're sick or something. Now, if you're sick or on your menses, that's different because there's no relation with a woman on her menses. Your husband cannot force you to have relations with him on your menses because this is forbidden in Islam. And if you do it, you're going to share in the sin with him. Because this is the one time that you as a woman can refuse him. You tell him, no, I'm on my menses and ain't no way this is happening. And also if he tries to get you to do the anal, you refuse that too. No. In fact, this is grounds for divorce. If you are married to a man who's trying to force you to have relations with him on your menses or through the anus, you should contact your guardian because this is grounds for you to divorce him. This is the grounds for akula because this is major sin. Okay? But other than that, you cannot refuse your husband. That's one of his rights. And also, something that men need to understand. It is forbidden in Islam for a man to go and divulge the secrets of a woman. For example, you just got married. You cannot go to the brothers and talk about your wife. Oh, let me tell you about my wife. My wife has big hips. Oh, my wife has big arms. Or my wife has long, pretty hair. That's none of their business. You don't reveal that stuff to other people. And on the same notion, women can't do the same thing either. You shouldn't go around the sisters talking about your husband either. This is personal. The Prophet ﷺ said, the most evil amongst the people in the eyes of Allah and will be the most evil of the people on the day of judgment are those men who have relations with their wife and then he goes and divulges their secrets to others. So we can't do this. Whatever goes on in your bedroom remains there. Whatever happens with you and your husband remains in the home. Do not take it out anywhere else, guys. The Prophet ﷺ said the most important of all the trust on the day of judgment will be a man who goes to his wife and she goes to him and they break that trust. Okay, we don't do that. This is forbidden in Islam. So again, I want you young Muslims, those of you who are newlyweds, to remember you may be excited, you may be happy and all that, but certain intimacy details you share with no one. You do not share your intimacy details with anyone. That stays between you and him. Everybody understand? Okay, and also this brings us to the question that many Muslims ask, what about birth control? Is birth control allowed in Islam? Yes, it is. A lot of non-Muslims are surprised when they hear that we do practice birth control. As long as it doesn't cause sterility, and it doesn't have to be just withdrawal. You can take birth control pills. You can take the shot. You can use the IUD. You can use any birth control method you want to, except for something like tying the tubes, because that's permanent. And also, guys, and I want you to understand, in order to use any type of birth control, both the husband and the wife have to agree to it. This is very important because one of the reasons why we marry is to procreate. It's a woman's right to have children. It's a man's right to have children. That's the purpose, one of the purposes of us getting married. So we both have to agree to it. We both have to agree to birth control. If the woman does not agree to it, then you can't do it. If the man is not in agreement, then you can't. They both have to agree. So what are the conditions of birth control? Number one, Both parties must be in agreement to use it. Number two, whatever birth control method you are using cannot cause sterility. Okay? Back in the Prophet's days, they did the withdrawal. They didn't have the shot, they didn't have the birth control pills back then. What they did then was the withdrawal. And a person came to the Prophet and asked about it. The Prophet said there's no harm in it because guess what? If Allah has decreed for a child to be conceived, nothing you can do will stop it from being conceived. That's why birth control is lawful. Do you know how many Muslim women can tell you that they got pregnant taking the pills? Do you know how many Muslim women got pregnant and had IUDs in them? I mean, it happens because if Allah decrees for a person to get pregnant, you're going to get pregnant. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said there is no harm if you practice it, for the birth of the child is something ordained by Allah. We have a hadith whereas a man came to the Prophet and said, I have a slave girl who's my servant and I have intercourse with her, but I don't want her to get pregnant. So I practice withdrawal. The Prophet said, withdraw from her if you like, but if it is decreed for her to get pregnant, she'll get pregnant. A few months later, the brother came to the Prophet and said, guess what, O Prophet? That slave girl I told you about, she's pregnant. And the Prophet said, didn't I tell you that nothing can stop the decree of Allah? So a lot of people get pregnant, with the IUD or taking birth control pills or whatever. So that's why it's lawful. But if it's going to be something that causes sterility or permanency, like tying the tubes, no, we don't do that. Getting a vasectomy, no. Having a hysterectomy, no. Unless it's a medical reason, we don't do that. So birth control is lawful in Islam, and a lot of the young Muslims get married and they ask about it, and we tell them it's okay. Yeah, I know you want to go to school or finish school. You might want to wait a couple of years before you have a child. That's all fine. Some people put that in their contract too. A lot of the young Muslim couples will put in their contract that inshallah we will hold off on having children for about a couple of years. We'll use birth control for a couple of years, until we get settled on our feet. You can put that in your contract if you want. Okay, but birth control is permissible if it meets those conditions. And also, when we talk about intimacy, not only is it allowed for a man and wife to do whatever they want in their bedroom as long as they avoid, anal and menses, it's also permissible for a man to have relations with his wife if she's nursing. Because there's some people out there who ask about that. If a woman had a baby and she's nursing, is it true that her husband cannot have relations with her? That's not true. We have the hadith whereas the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I was going to forbid having relations with a woman who is nursing until I thought about the Romans. The Romans and the Persians, they do, and their children are fine. Because what happened was the Jews used to believe that if a man had relations with his wife while she was nursing, the child would come out retarded. Well, this is not true. We know that. But back then, that's what they believed. But the Prophet said, look at how many Romans and look how many Persian children are born every day. And, none of their kids are retarded and they have relations with their wives when their wives are nursing. Okay, so this is lawful in Islam. We have the hadith whereas a man came to the Prophet and said, I withdraw from my wife. I have relations with my wife and my wife is nursing, but I withdraw from her. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, why do you withdraw? And he said, because I don't want the child to come out retarded or deformed. And the Prophet said, if that were true, then There's no harm with the Persians and the Romans and the Greeks who do it. So again, guys, it is permissible for a man to have relations with his wife when she's nursing. Okay, Islam allows for that. So as you can see, guys, a lot of people are shocked. They think that our religion or our way of life is so strict. It's not. We Muslims are normal people. We have good relations with our spouses. We can do the same thing that other people do. We're not restricted. Okay, and so now what we're going to speak about is fosterage. And what does it mean we talk about fosterage? And this is a big issue with Muslims around the world today. It's adopting children or whatnot. Okay, adoption. Every Muslim here should know adoption is haram. Under no circumstances can you adopt a child. We can foster a child, but we cannot adopt a child. We can sponsor a child, but we cannot adopt it. Let's look at this first hadith. Aisha tells us that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting with her one day, and they heard a man asking permission to visit Hafsa. Hafsa was another one of the wives of the Prophet. And the Prophet was like, who is that man? And Aisha said, oh, Prophet, that's her uncle by fosterage. In other words, they were both suckled or nursed by the same woman. I want you guys to understand, in Islam, anybody who is nursed by the same woman as you becomes your brother, becomes your sister, and your relatives become their relatives. Your relatives are the same. So that's why in Islam, as Muslim women, we have to keep track of the children that we nurse. Children under the age of 2 years old who suckle from us, they become our children. It's like blood relations. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the sperm and the milk and the sperm are like blood. Okay? So that means you're related. So that's why you have to be careful who you suckle, because if you suckle a child, that's your child, and your family becomes his family, and they're unlawful marriage. Okay? And this is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. He said, fosterage makes unlawful what consanguinity makes unlawful. Okay, in other words, once a woman suckles or nurses a child, that child becomes of her blood, and you guys are related. And this was a big deal and still is amongst the Arabic people. Okay, and Western women don't do it so much, but the Arabic women still, will nurse others. Okay, and any man who's been nursed, by your relative is a relative of yours. In fact, let me share something with you guys. Salama. Salama was one of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one day, her and the other wives were speaking about the daughter of Hamza. She was single. She was a good woman. So Salama went to the Prophet and said to him, isn't Hamza's daughter a good match for you to marry? He said, I can't marry her. He said, because Hamza is my brother by reason of fosterage. In other words, a lot of people don't know. Remember Hamza, the one who was the Prophet's uncle? He said, not only was Hamza my uncle, but he was my brother. We were nursed by the same woman, a woman named Thaima. Not Halima, but Thaiba. We were nursed by Thaiba. Okay? Thaiba was a woman who nursed the Prophet before Halima did. Okay? So again, and that means you can't marry anyone from them because y'all are brothers. Okay, so Hamza was also the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's brother, and that's why he couldn't marry any of his daughters. Okay, and just like you can't marry a woman or a man who's been nursed by the same person as you, Islam also forbids, and this is important, a man cannot marry his stepdaughter either. And this is a big thing. This is why in Islam, you Muslim women have to stop calling yourselves sister wives, because we are not sister wives. The Mormons believe in this. The Mormon people, they marry their stepdaughters and their sisters and all that other stuff. We don't do that. That's considered incest. A man cannot marry the daughter of any woman that he was ever married to. Everybody understand that? Example, my stepfather. He's not my real father. My real father died when I was young. But my stepfather married my mother. He became my stepfather. They're divorced now. My stepfather could never marry me because we're considered as father and daughter. Does everybody understand that? So Islam forbids us from marrying stepdaughters. Now let me share something with you guys. A lot of people were jealous of Salama and Salama's daughter. Salama's daughter, her name was Durra, and she was very beautiful. And so the Prophet taught her well. He raised her, taught her the religion, groomed her, and all of that. So some people said, why come the Prophet doesn't marry her? So he told them, how can I marry her? She's my stepdaughter. Islam forbids us from a man from marrying any daughters born from a woman he was married to. And not only that, but her father, Abu Salama, was my foster brother, because just like Hamza, he was suckled by Thuwayba just like Hamza was. A lot of Muslims don't know that. Halima was not the only nursemaid that the Prophet had. Thuwayba nursed him when he was first born. She also nursed Hamza. She also nursed Abu Salama and so many others. Okay? He said, but I could never marry Salama's daughter because she's my stepdaughter, number one, and also her father was my brother through fosterage. So this is something that we have to remember, and that tells you who your mahrams are. Any man who was married to your mother is a mahram to you. Do you sisters understand that? Any man who was married to your mother is a mahram to you. That means you can never marry him. Okay? Also, when we speak about fosterage, a lot of Muslims send emails asking me this, Sister Layla, how many sucklings does it take for a child to become a mahram to you? Well, 1 or 2 doesn't get it. It has to be 5. Aisha tells us that Allah reveals in the Quran 10 sucklings or 5 sucklings. So just because a person was suckled twice, or that means 2 drops of milk or 1 drop of milk, doesn't make that person related to you. It has to be at least 5 clear sucklings. Does everybody understand that? So for you women who are nursing other people's babies, understand if that baby takes 5 clear sucks from you, then that child becomes a mahram to you. Okay, does everybody understand that? And also, this is very, very important. This is very, very important. You can only suckle a child up to the age of 2 years old to make it a mahram. Any child over the age of 2 whom you nurse or you suckle is not a mahram. And a lot of Muslims will tell us the story of Salim. There's the case of Salim. Salim was a young boy who was a slave who lived with Abu Hudayfa and his family as a child. And then when Salim reached the age of puberty, Abu Hudayfa approached the Prophet and said, "What am I going to do? We raised Salim as a child. Now he's puberty. I can't have him around my wife and my daughters, so what do I do?" Abu Hudayfa's wife at that time had just given birth to another child, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, have your wife give him some of her breast milk, and that will make him a mahram. And she did. But guess what, guys? That was a one-time thing, only allowed for Salim. Salama, the wife of the Prophet, used to say that all the wives of the Prophet disclaimed the idea that you can foster a person over the age of 2. They said in regards to the case of Salim, this was a concession only given to Abu Hudayfa for him. After that, Allah sent down the verses of the Quran saying the age of 2. That's it, guys. And this is very important because there's some Muslim women out there who want to adopt children. They find out adoption is haram in Islam. So they'll come upon a 5-year-old child and, I'm going to give him some of my breast milk. And now he's a mahram. No. The cutoff age is 2. You cannot use this hadith about Salim and think that it can be used today. This was a one-time concession, only allowed for him. And there's the evidence right there from Salama. We have a hadith here where the Prophet came to visit Aisha and a man was sitting next to her and the Prophet was kind of angry. So she said, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, he's my brother through fosterage." The Prophet said, "Make sure you know who your brothers are through fosterage, because fosterage only occurs through infancy." There's the evidence. The age of 2 is the cutoff. Anyone who shares breast milk from a woman and they're over the age of 2 years old, that's not that's the cutoff. That's not fosterage. That child is not a mahram. Does every woman here understand? This is very important for you Muslim women to understand. You have a 3-year-old kid. You think that you're nursing him and now he's going to, or give him some of your breast milk, he's going to become a mahram to you? No. The cutoff age is 2. It only occurs through infancy. Infancy is cut off at the age of 2. Allah says in the Quran, 2 years old. So don't use this hadith about Salim, who was puberty. Okay, because that was a one-time thing before Allah sent down the other verses. So what do we walk away having learned today? Well, number 1, we learned that a man can only divorce a woman 2 times and take her back. After the second time, he cannot take her back nor remarry her until she marries another and consummates that marriage and then divorces. We also learned today that Islam allows sexual relations between the spouses, and anything is lawful except for relations while a woman is on her menses and relations in the anus. Also, we learned today that certain supplications can be pronounced by a man before having relations with his wife, and as a result, If it's a male child, that child will be protected against shaitan. We also learn that Islam forbids a woman from refusing to share her husband's bed. So you women need to understand that. This is a major sin in Islam for you to refuse your husband's bed. We also learn that Islam is a beautiful way of life. Most things in life are lawful. Birth control is lawful in Islam as long as both parties are in agreement to it, and whatever birth control they are using does not cause sterility. We also learned today that whatever happens between a husband and his wife intimately should stay between them. It is forbidden in Islam to disclose personal things about your spouses to each other. To others. We also learned today that it is lawful to have relations with your wife when she's nursing. And we also learned that any child suckled by a woman under the age of 2 and that child receives at least 5 sucks is considered to be blood related, and the laws of mahram apply. We also learned today that Islam forbids a man from marrying the daughter of any woman he has been married to. In other words, your stepdaughters are not lawful for you in marriage. This is considered incest. And finally, we remember Islam forbids a man from marrying 2 sisters at the same time. So these are things we want to walk away today having understood. I strongly encourage you guys to, when I post this up on YouTube, to later go on YouTube and watch the PowerPoint video. Also to download the lecture on SoundCloud, because tomorrow's quiz is going to be very detailed. Tomorrow I'm going to give you a quiz about these hadiths just to see how well you understand these rules. As you can see, marriage is a beautiful institution in Islam. Allah sets laws in effect, guidelines in effect, to try to help us to become, to live together in peace and harmony. Again, when you're making your marriage contract as women, be careful what you put in there, because there are certain rights that Allah gave a man, such as a right to have another wife, the right to share his bed, that he doesn't have to honor if you put that in a contract. On that note, we'll stop right here for today. If you guys have any questions, or if you need more clarification on any of these hadiths, you can go ahead and type them on the screen. And let me also remind you guys, we are always in need of donations to keep this website going. If you are truly enjoying learning Islam and its truthfulness with the perfect understanding, the understanding of the companions, then please support this dawah effort by sending a donation to us through PayPal. Okay? All right, so we'll stop right here. If you guys have any questions or comments, you can type them on the screen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.